Coming up on a newscast, the South Korean won dips to another low against the dollar. Over in the U.S., the consumer price index spiked faster than expected. South Korean regulators issued fines to Google and the parent company of Facebook for violating local privacy laws. Meanwhile, the EU's General Court upheld an antitrust ruling against Google, but reduced its fine. The coffin carrying Queen Elizabeth II arrives at Buckingham Palace. On Wednesday, it will be carried through central London as part of a procession to Westminster Hall, with access provided to ordinary citizens. Hello, it's good to have you with us. I'm Daniel Che here to bring the latest. Let's begin with the top story at this hour. Consumer prices in the U.S. rose faster than expected. This comes despite aggressive measures by the Fed and the Inflation Reduction Act. With another rate hike looking likely, stocks slide. Kim Yo-sun starts us off.
The U.S. Consumer Price Index unexpectedly rose by 8.3% on year in August. According to data released by the Bureau of Labor Statistics on Tuesday, the core CPI, which excludes volatile food and energy costs, climbed 6.3% from the same month last year. This was a 0.1% increase in overall inflation from July, while core inflation rose 0.6% on month. Pundits had been expecting a decline of 0.1% for overall inflation, with a rise of 0.3% for core inflation. They now believe that the U.S. Central Bank will remain aggressive in its tightening of monetary policy. The inflation report was one of the last pieces of information on inflation that the Fed will see prior to its September meeting, where policymakers are expected to deliver their third consecutive 0.75 percentage point rate hike to curb inflation. Despite concerns that continued rate hikes may tip the country's economy into recession, Fed Chair Jerome Powell stressed last week that he is, quote, strongly committed to bringing inflation down. Following the release of the August inflation report, U.S. stocks fell sharply on Tuesday. The Dow Jones Industrial Average slid nearly 4%, while the S&P 500 and the tech-heavy Nasdaq sank by more than 4% and 5% respectively. Only 5 stocks in the S&P 500 ended the day in positive territory. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the South Korean currency dips to its lowest level against the greenback in more than 13 years. Concerns over bigger interest rate hikes by the Fed also send stocks plunging. Ji-young helps us look beyond the digits.
The South Korean won has tumbled to yet another more than a decade low against the U.S. dollar. During Wednesday's session, the exchange rate crossed the 1,391 mark, reaching 1,395.5 at one point. This marks the weakest figure for South Korea's currency since March 2009, when it topped 1,422 won in the aftermath of the global financial crisis. The won closed trading on Wednesday at 1,390.91, up about 17.3 from the previous session. The plunge came just hours after the announcement of the higher-than-expected U.S. Consumer Price Index, jumping by 8.3% on year last month. The won is likely to weaken further as there are forecasts the latest U.S. inflation data will push the Fed to maintain its hawkish stance on monetary policies, further strengthening the greenback. Market experts anticipate at least a 75 basis point rate hike by the Fed, and thus more volatility is expected in the local financial markets.
In September, it's certain that the Fed's going to take a giant step with its next rate hike. The won is likely to weaken further against the US dollar to top the 1,400 mark in a short period of time. And it's likely that there'll continue to be a negative impact on stocks.
The benchmark Kospi also fell below the 2,400 mark earlier during Wednesday's session, prompted by the report on U.S. consumer prices. The Kospi fell 1.56% on Wednesday, closing the day at 2,411.42. The tech-heavy Kosdaq also dropped, falling 1.74% to close at 782.93. The South Korean government says it'll do all it can to deal with the volatility. During an emergency economic task force meeting on Wednesday, First Vice Finance Minister Bang Gi-sun said growing uncertainties due to possible further rate hikes in major economies have caused greater volatility. He added that the government will monitor the financial and the foreign currency markets with extra caution and called on the related authorities to thoroughly search for all available measures. 엄지영, Arirang News.
Consumer prices are also rising fast here in the nation. Daily commodities like instant noodles and snacks are becoming more expensive. Utility bills will be going up ahead of Korea's notoriously cold winter as well. Here's Chae Min-jung with a breakdown of the figures.
People in South Korea have already had a rather expensive Chuseok holiday due to soaring inflation. And now they are bracing for further price hikes.
Prices aren't falling even after Chuseok, so I'm hesitant. I have to think twice before buying anything.
Included on the list of products that are about to become more costly is Nongshim's instant noodles. From Thursday, the price of a 신라면 will rise by around 11%. So instead of paying 53 cents for a serving, people will now have to fork out 59 cents. Nongshim says the price hike is due to increasing prices of grain caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In total, the company is raising the prices of 26 items. Other instant noodle manufacturers like Palto, Otugi, and Samyang are set to follow suit. The same goes for snacks. Orion is raising the price of its signature choco pie for the first time in 9 years. People will now have to pay 43 cents more to buy a box of 12 choco pies. Orion says the hike was inevitable considering the rising price of raw materials. Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho on Tuesday urged officials to focus on stabilizing people's livelihoods by monitoring price trends after Chuseok. However, pundits say inflationary pressure is bound to get heavier as electricity and gas rates are also expected to jump next month. The inflation rate in August did decline compared to previous months to under 6%. But given the uptick in prices for food products, there are concerns that the rate will not continue on a downward trend. The government has forecast that inflation will hit its peak either at the end of this month or sometime in October. Chae Min-jung, Arirang News.
According to the nation's central bank, the U.S. and Europe face a growing risk of recession, something that could cause economic slowdown here in South Korea. The BOK attributed the risk to aggressive interest hikes coupled with continued inflation and the cutoff of Russian gas. A senior official said a recession in Washington would hit Seoul's exports. A recession in Europe, which is more likely than one in the States, would cause a sharp rise in raw material prices. That's because while conditions can change within an economy, supply chains in Europe have mostly been impacted by external factors. South Korean regulators are fining Google and the parent company of Facebook for violating local privacy laws. The tech giants are blamed for collecting private data for use in personalized ad without user permission. Shin Ha-young has the details.
South Korea has taken strong action against two tech giants, Google and parent company of Facebook, Meta. The Personal Information Protection Commission, or PIPC, said Wednesday that it's fined Google around $50 million and Meta $22 million for violating local privacy laws.
It has been confirmed that Google and Meta have been violating the law by collecting and analyzing users' personal information for personalized online advertisements without their consent or clearly informing them.
Google has been collecting personal data through its default settings for users to give consent for at least 6 years since 2016. In case of Meta, it has not informed or obtained permission from users for the last 4 years. As a result, over 82% of Google users and over 98% of Meta users in South Korea have been unknowingly allowing the platforms to collect their information. At 100 billion Korean won, or around $72 million in total, the penalties are the biggest the regulator has ever issued for privacy violations. The PIPC also ordered the tech giants to clearly inform users when their information is being collected and used, and to obtain their consent in a way that enables them to exercise their right to privacy. Responding to the fine, Google said it will further discuss user privacy in South Korea with the Commission. On the other hand, Meta said it disagrees with the decision and is open to all options, including taking the issue to court. 신하영, Arirang News.
The EU's General Court upheld an antitrust ruling against Google, but reduced its fine to a little over 4.1 billion euros, roughly 4.1 billion US dollars, from 4.3 billion. The court said Google imposed unlawful restrictions on manufacturers of Android devices and mobile network operators for the gain of its search engine. This is a record fine for an antitrust violation and the second court defeat for the tech giant, which lost its challenge to a 2.4 billion euro fine last year. The survival of this country lies on the semiconductor industry. That's coming from President Yoon during a lunch meeting with members of the ruling bloc's Special Committee on Strengthening Competitiveness of the Chip Sector.
하여튼 반도체가 지금 산업의 쌀이라고 그러고 4차 산업혁명에서 가장 또 중요한 분야이기 때문에 어떻게 보면 우리 상사가 걸려 있다고도 할 수 있고.
He promised to focus on nurturing a highly skilled workforce and invest in the semiconductor industry. The special committee led by People Power Party lawmaker Yang Yang-ja asked the president for support of the K-CHIPS Act, a bill designed to increase tax benefits for high-tech businesses. It awaits parliamentary approval after being submitted by the committee last month. The semiconductor sector has been one of the South Korean leaders' primary focal points since taking office in May. There are concerns of a twindemic as immunity to both COVID-19 and the seasonal flu has been waning. Authorities say, though, the term is misleading and that they're taking precautionary measures. Meanwhile, experts review when would be the right time to lift the indoor mask mandate. Shin Yeon brings the updates.
There are worries about a twindemic here in South Korea. A twindemic refers to a spike of COVID-19 cases along with the seasonal flu. While the chances of a person catching both viral diseases at the same time are low, if they do, the death rate doubles compared to a person who's only infected with COVID-19. Recently, we've seen the number of people with the flu increase. Back in September 2020, only 1 out of 1,000 people went to see a doctor for the flu. Now, this number has increased to 5 out of 1,000. COVID-19 infections have also increased by more than 36,000 in a span of just 24 hours. On Wednesday, nearly 94,000 cases were reported. But the country's health officials have clarified that it'd be misleading to call this situation a twindemic.
Recently, many media outlets have spoken about a multidemic or twindemic, but there's no such medical term. COVID-19 is a pandemic and the flu is not. Stats may suggest this year's flu has hit us harder than the last 2 years, but it's just come a bit earlier. We must take precautionary measures to stop further spread.
This expert asked people to get tested. There are both PCR and rapid antigen tests for COVID and the flu. With authorities high on alert over the spread of COVID-19, health experts say lifting indoor mask mandates would only be possible as early as next spring.
Countries that have lifted mask mandates everywhere have first checked if most of the population has been vaccinated and whether they have antibodies to fight off 80% of the virus. We should too. Then we can start lifting mandates at places that can easily ventilate, like schools. Once people have more antibodies, the country should allow people to take off their masks on public transport.
This health expert also said COVID-19 should be treated at all hospitals, just like the regular flu. She mainly pointed out that putting people with COVID-19 under self-isolation could be dangerous, especially during the flu season, as it's hard to differentiate the two with their similar symptoms. Shin Yeon, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now, the USS Ronald Reagan conducted flight operations in the Pacific Ocean ahead of combined naval exercise with South Korea later this month. Release photos show an FA-18E Super Hornet launching and landing on the carrier's flight deck. According to the U.S. Navy, the fighters are attached to the Dambusters of Strike Fighter Squadron. Dambusters got their nickname in 1951 when the squadron destroyed the heavily defended Hwacheon Dam in North Korea with aerial torpedoes by making precision low-level runs. The USS Ronald Reagan is set to arrive in Busan next week. This will be the first time in 5 years that a U.S. nuclear-powered aircraft carrier is in the country for a combined drill. President Xi Jinping arrived in Kazakhstan on Wednesday for a 3-day visit to Central Asia, his first trip outside the mainland China since the pandemic. The Chinese leader is expected to hold talks with President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev on Wednesday and sign a number of agreements to strengthen comprehensive strategic partnership. Xi will then head to Uzbekistan to attend a regional summit and meet Russian President Vladimir Putin. The two are likely to discuss the war in Ukraine. The trip comes as the ruling Communist Party prepares for an October Congress where Xi will try to award himself a third term as the country's leader. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy claims his forces have regained about 8,000 square kilometers of territory from Russia. There's a great deal of hope among Ukraine's supporters around the world, but others are urging caution, warning the war is far from over. Kim Jong-sil has the full story.
As of now, stabilization measures have been completed in districts with a total area of more than 4,000 square kilometers. Stabilization continues in the liberated territory of approximately the same size.
That adds up to 8,000 square kilometers of territory, which is 2,000 more than what President Zelenskyy said they'd retaken earlier this week. Ukrainian officials, though, say it's important to make a distinction between taking territory and ensuring it is totally safe. Meanwhile, world leaders are pressuring the Kremlin to end the war. On Tuesday, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz spoke on the phone with Russian President Vladimir Putin, urging him to completely withdraw his troops from Ukraine. According to a German government spokesperson, Chancellor Scholz stressed that any further Russian moves would not go unanswered and would not be recognized under any circumstances. The chancellor urged the Russian president to find a diplomatic solution as soon as possible. U.S. President Joe Biden took a more cautious approach to Ukraine's recent advances. Asked whether Ukraine has reached a turning point in the war, Biden said this.
The question is unanswerable right now. It's hard to tell. It's clear the Ukrainians have made significant progress, but I think it's going to be a long haul.
Meanwhile, the IAEA said Tuesday that all 3 backup power lines to the nuclear power plant in Zaporizhzhia have been restored over the past few days. There's been concern that the southeastern city in Ukraine, occupied by Russian troops since March, could be the scene of a nuclear disaster. As for the Ukrainian economy, there was some positive news Tuesday from the Wall Street Journal, which said that business is picking up again. It said that deliveries by Nova Posta Ukraine's equivalent of FedEx are back to 90% of their pre-war level, and there are more jobs listed on the country's biggest employment website, work.ua. It said Ukraine's recent counterattacks have created enough certainty for economic activity to resume in the parts of Ukraine not occupied by Russia. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
The coffin carrying Queen Elizabeth II arrived at Buckingham Palace on Tuesday after being transported from the RAF Northolt Air Base in West London. On Wednesday, the coffin will be carried through central London as part of a ceremonial procession to Westminster Hall. Members of the public will be able to walk past the coffin from Wednesday evening until 6:30 a.m. on September 19th, the day of the funeral, which will be attended by dozens of world leaders. After the ceremony, her coffin will be taken to Windsor, where she will be laid to rest within St. George's Chapel. Queen Elizabeth II, Britain's longest reigning monarch, died peacefully last Thursday at Balmoral Castle in the Scottish Highlands. India will assume presidency of the G20 for a year starting in December. This means the G20 Leaders Summit will be held in New Delhi next September on the 9th and 10th. According to the country's foreign ministry, it'll invite leaders of non-members such as Bangladesh, Egypt, Mauritius, and Nigeria. Over 200 G20 meetings will be held across India beginning December. The top agenda items will be related to inclusive, equitable, and sustainable growth, such as the Lifestyles for Environment movement, digital public infrastructure, climate financing, global food security, and energy security. A big international garden expo is returning for the first time in a decade. Preparations are underway to transform not only the site, but also the wetlands and the city of Suntan, so residents can experience some extra greenery in their daily lives. Jung Eun-ju provides a glimpse of what to expect.
The first Suntan International Garden Expo was held back in 2013. A groundbreaking event for the city of Suntan, Jeollanam-do province, to promote itself as the ecological capital of South Korea. Almost 4.4 million people visited the city at the time when Suncheon had a population of less than 300,000. A decade later, the Suncheon International Garden Expo is returning, and Suncheon is looking to make it even better.
First, the National Garden will be completely renewed. Second, we will show how the Dongcheon River and Korea's first water detention pond may be utilized as living space.
The exposition grounds have already been named as Korea's first national garden and is a tourist attraction all year round.
It's a little hot in the middle of the day, but I think it would be nice to come and take a walk with friends or family when it's cooler.
Next year, the exposition will enable visitors to take in the picturesque sunsets of the wetlands, coastal and suburban gardens, and some wildlife like hooded cranes, which are a common sight in Suncheon. The exposition also aims to create business opportunities for the landscaping industry, as well as local traders who can set up stalls at the Suncheon Bay Garden Market.
The garden market is a cultural and sales venue where people can sell, buy, and enjoy everything from trees and more in one place.
Above all, the city hopes to create a garden road where the city itself serves as a garden.
Suncheon Bay, the garden exposition site we are currently making, and Jeollanam-do province are all agricultural sites. We hope to combine landscape and agriculture to create an area that has never been seen before in the country, and even perhaps the whole world.
The Jeollanam-do province local government and the Korea Forest Service will fully support the upcoming Garden Expo. Jung Eun-ju, Arirang News.
Unseasonable heat will continue for western parts of the country tomorrow. That includes the Seoul metropolitan area. Daytime highs will soar to near 30 degrees Celsius or even higher for some regions. Places like Jeonju and Jeollabuk-do province will be close to sweltering at 31 degrees tomorrow. But for eastern regions where cold easterly winds are bringing temperatures down, conditions will be much breezier. In the meantime, another typhoon called Nanmadol has been created near waters off of Okinawa, Japan. This typhoon may potentially affect the Korean peninsula, although the projected pathway is subject to change. For now, Nanmadol will head towards the northwest, and by next Monday, it may approach near waters off of Seogwipo, Jeju Island. Isolated showers are expected for Jeju tomorrow, and as for the readings, lows in Seoul and Daejeon will be starting off at 21 degrees. Daily highs in Seoul will be reaching 29, Gwangju 31, Gyeongju will be breezy at 25 degrees. For the remainder of the week, Jeju Island will see frequent showers, and for the capital region, unseasonable heat will continue. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
And that's all from us. As always, thank you for watching.